Hi all, welcome to BRR Knowledge Center. And in this today's topic, we'll talk about importance of migrating .NET Framework applications to .NET 6.0. That is the latest version of .NET. So, uh, so what is the purpose and what is the need in migrating the existing .NET Framework versions to the latest .NET Framework, that is .NET Core or .NET 6.0? Let me tell you some of the importance of this .NET 6.0 with pros and cons, and that way I think you will be knowing or having awareness on purpose and advantages of having said to that no migrating of this existing old frameworks to .NET 6.0 is required or not. So the most famous project among the .NET platform was the ASP.NET Web Forms, and we used to use this ASP.NET Web Forms since many years to build web applications. And but nowadays, most of them people are hating this because no many companies on that time to migrate some legacy Windows form applications to the web forms, and once they converted into that, Visual Studio allowed developers just drag and drop controls in visual design mode, and it was very simple and very easy for the developers to design web applications. And it's similar experience that took place for desktop applications. So I know that a feature usually did not generate the best HTML ever, but I think the idea was good in general and had its value at the beginning of it. So that's why everyone moved to ASP.NET Forms and had a good experience that those days. But nowadays, it is not in a good performance in many cases. Once everything was rendered at the backend, including the HTML, keeping that state using tricks with the view state, the payload of the page each time, so the payload of each page could enormous, and in many cases, but it was pretty easy to develop with it. So let me tell you some options like pros and cons of this existing .NET framework. If you look at ASP.NET, ASP.NET Web Forms, so it is what the people are using since many years to get rid of the desktop applications or the legacy applications. It has a lot of problems with it, like as I said, the view state, like how it is managing, and some of the commands, status commands, like having a maintaining of state, http state, like client side and server side, and payload of each page, having sometimes payload of each page having errors, and so, and sometimes it is having good features of a toolbar to design the form, but when it comes to in layer architecture, when it comes to running on the live, once usually generate HTML and showcase on UI, the back end including HTML, it purely depends on the state management of stuff. So the .NET framework introduced the ASP.NET project template in order to follow the good practices used in the rest of the market. So it was tremendous success because it was possible to separate the responsibilities between the different layer of application by default, and Visual Studio tools allowed to easily create crude operations using this scaffold option, which creates all the necessary views, database commands, entity framework, and the logic in the controller without relevant effort, etc. So that means ASP.NET MVC. This is for the next generation having it. So where you have complete templates, design patterns here, MVC pattern, model view control, so where you have different sections, separation of concerns, and that way I think people are very much interested in migrating to this ASP.NET MVC, and then it has now a scaffolding option here to create a project, and that way I think you will have all necessary views and database commands using entity framework, and logic also comes in the controller without relevant effort. So it was a lot of productivity, and everyone was convinced of its benefits comparison with ASP.NET Web Forms. Okay, so it has as I said, having views and controllers and models. Let's say, I think I can say like models views controller, model views controllers, and entity framework where you will have a database related options and inbuilt having some logic in it. And it was convinced everyone to get rid of the ASP.NET Web Forms problem. And also it has a better performance compared to ASP.NET Web Forms. Better performance it has, and also compliance with good practices. Compliance with good practices of Web API. This is where the API was introduced in the ASP.NET MVC for the upcoming boom of the client-side libraries, and it has improvements in terms of testability, also security enhancements. It had security enhancements we have here in the MVC, and improvement in terms of testability. Testability of your application. So the ASP.NET MVC project template had huge impact on web development among .NET developers, once the majority of enterprise applications to this date still having many many crude and repetitive operations. Additionally, the use of integration test was already popular practice at this point, and the use of controllers for handling the required request became the task much easier using this ASP.NET MVC. And then we see ASP.NET Web API with kind of client-side libraries where you build API and having using client-side libraries build UI and call the APIs, and that way you build application instead of using it ASP.NET Web Forms or ASP.NET MVC. So the ASP.NET Web API basically having in place to build an API which will return the data from the model or the database, and the client side libraries like JavaScript or jQuery or Angular or other React and Node or Vue can be used for designing of UI. So web development changed considerably in order to move the payload from a server to the client side in every case. So it is possible because of using a API. So with applications being used by millions of users making constant requests, scalability became a key point. And in this context, the responsibility delegation to client was definitely a good idea. So the use of client-side libraries are got pretty popular with Angular and React or Vue leading the market, because in order to meet this demand, the creation of an application with only Web API in the background on the back end and Angular React projects in the front end was a powerful option in order to keep the use of controllers in the back end and meeting the requirement of the use of client side to build a single page applications. So therefore, the Angular and React templates combined with the ASP.NET Web API project in the backend started being one of the most preferred option among .NET developers for web development. So the ASP.NET Web Forms had not good performance in many cases. Hence, I think people are very much interested in building APIs. So here, if you look at here, one option was delegate delegation to the client browser or client. So I definitely a good idea having it this request processing via API. So that means building APIs uh, in backend and building UI using Angular, React, or Vue from front end. So, and that way, I think it is meeting the requirement of the use of client side front end and building single page applications, building single page applications. So these things have been no adopted after this ASP.NET Web API 1, and even this one or two versions with client-side libraries. So apart from these, there are some reasons to migrate it to .NET 6. The first one is there is no support anymore of really old versions of .NET framework. There is no support uh, anymore for really the old versions of .NET framework. This we should agree. Everyone should agree on this, because going forward, the old versions are going to retire, getting retired, and no support we have going forward in the future. And second one is there are no updates on this old versions anymore regarding web forms. And third one is the maintenance of the project built in old versions of .NET Framework is costing more money once it is consuming more server resources, because things are happening at the server side, ASP.NET. So no APIs or no client side front end technologies we are using it with old framework. Hence, it is more costly compared to the latest technologies. So the maintenance of the projects built in old versions of .NET framework is costlier or costing more money once it is consuming more server resources, because things are happening and executing in the server side always in the ASP.NET web forms. Hence we require more space on the web server, and that way it is costlier. And coming to this fourth one, .NET Core or .NET 6 contain tons of improvements. This is the latest one in terms of performance, because of having different layers and different features, and also improvements in terms of syntax and features in new versions of ASP.NET C#. Improvements in terms of syntax and features in newer versions of .NET and C#. Okay, these are some of the areas. And also I think as part of security, it is always a good point in newer technology, and that you can note it as a security point here. Better security. If you take any tool or software, they definitely are usually improve their security fixes or benefits in the latest technologies, but not in the old versions, right? So for the better security, is always, I think, a good point in newer technologies. This we must note it. So over time, I think it is much harder to find professionals who are willing to work with old technologies as well, right? So everyone likes now new technologies, and it's include getting difficulties in the hiring process by the opportunity to constantly review the projects to be sure they are following the best practices of software development. So stability is a good point here. Once new version always contain the relevant updates and fix the legacy features, right? So, and 7 point was the stability. So stability is a good uh, point. We need to note it here. Once newer version always contain relevant updates, as people are now preferring upgrading it to new versions. They'll include the stability related stuff in the new versions, contain relevant updates, and fix the legacy issues or legacy features. So these are the different points here to make note to migrate into latest versions of .NET framework. So, and also last one we can say cheap deployment, deployment, I can say. So right now, so we used to deploy, or we only deploy in Windows, but if you migrate it to .NET 6 or Core, we can deploy in different operating systems. So even though Windows still dominates the desktop market, so Linux is the market leader when it comes to enterprise servers and the cloud. So as you may know that .NET Core is free and open source, cross-platform, and run basically everywhere. It is better to run web application of in .NET Core with open source Angular or Linux platform. Deployment of the application on Linux server is more popular than Windows Server over the last few years because of the lower price. So easy of deploying on large scale, easier to customize and open source software. Linux and Unix based systems, which provides powerful, reliable, and stable environments. So Linux is also secure. It restricts the influence from the external sources. So I can say cheap deployment. Why did I say this? Cheap deployment means .NET Core was free and open source, can be installed on any OS or everywhere, and as like uh, deployment of projects on Linux server is popular than any more popular than Windows Server over the last few years. Okay, so these are the several cases we need to look at it and decide to make over or go over and upgrading or migrating the existing .NET framework to a latest .NET framework, that is .NET 6.0. So as I mentioned, these are all the benefits we have it in the latest technologies. Hence, I suggest everyone to look at the new technologies and new versions of your existing software and go for migrating it. So I hope you understand the need and the purpose of migrating .NET framework to a .NET 6.0. Uh, Thanks for listening to this video. I hope you understand the purpose and the need of having migration between the older legacy .NET framework versions to a newer .NET framework version of 6.0. Thank you. Thanks for listening to this video.